and we are going to move to the 1st and 10 segment. Woo. That was intense. But anyways, 1st and 10, we are going to UFC Fight Night recap. Now, this one I actually just watched last night, so I'm glad that I was able to put this in the show. Great card. ESPN Plus, you already know what I'm going to say. Hit your boy up with that sponsorship. You know, nobody's pushing out ESPN Plus more than your boy for free. But hopefully, you know, ESPN Plus could hook me up with a, you know, at least a free subscription. But again, for UFC fans or people that do not watch UFC, or maybe interested in combat sports like boxing, I would suggest that you look into UFC. They have some great things going along. I know there's a boxing match that's going to be occurring this week on ESPN. I'll actually review those fights next week on the podcast in the Down and Distance series. But right now, UFC has been dominating sports. 3 straight weeks with, you know, an event every weekend. UFC's look great. And for whatever reason, the fight cards keep getting better and better. And there's no exception here with this most recent fight night, headlined by Dan Hooker versus Dustin Poirier. So I'll actually get into that one last because that is the main event. We'll actually go down the list of fights on the main card. There was about 6 of them. There was supposed to be 7. One of them was canceled. So we'll go ahead and start on the first fight of the main card, which was Sean Woodson versus Julian Erosa. So Erosa was a late ad, big underdog. Woodson was the biggest favorite on the card, on the main card. So he was expected to win easily. And to be honest, during that fight, the first 2 rounds, Woodson was dominating. I mean, he was, especially when it came to the striking, he was dominating Erosa, and you know, it looked like it was going to be an easy win for him. For those of you that bet on Woodson, I feel sorry for you. It looked great for the first 2 rounds. 3rd round, he started slowing down. Again, he started the 3rd round pretty quick, but you could tell his pace was slowing down. He had he put a whooping on Erosa, and again, I thought it was going to be a walk in the park. But with UFC and these combat sports, anything can happen, especially when it comes to grappling. So I want to say that Woodson, like during the fight, I was like, oh man, this dude's a good fighter, especially on his feet. He's a good striker. But, you know, what happens when he gets on the ground? And this is during the fight. So in the 3rd round, Erosa actually gets him on the ground. You know, there was a scramble for a second. And, you know, Erosa, number one, he's a great chin because, like I said, he got hit with some big shots and just kept coming forward. But was able to do some scrambles on the ground and get Woodson in a Doris choke. And that was it. Once he got him there, locked it up on his feet, took him to the ground, locked it in, and tapped him out in the 3rd round for a crazy comeback because he had 0 chance of winning if it went to decision. He got dominated for the first 2 rounds. Again, Erosa has a great chin and was eating all these punches, man. I couldn't understand how he was able to withstand that much damage. But big shout out to those of you that actually bet on Rosa, because he's the biggest the underdog on the whole card. So big shout out to him. Next we got Takashi Sato versus Jason Witt. Not Witten like Cowboys tight end, but Jason Witt. Witt. So this one was 2 heavy hitters, and you know, it's supposed to be a slugfest. I anticipated it to be a striking match, and we were not disappointed. After a first round knockout, Takashi, not 6'9", but Takashi Sato was able to hit him with a crazy 1-2 combination, set him up with the jab to the right, and as Witt is fighting off that jab, he gets hit with this straight left hand right on his chin and puts him right on his back. And that was the end of the fight. It was the first round. Takashi is a big hitter, and he got hit. Witt got hit with a ridiculous left hand. Unfortunately, again, this is a late add to the card. Jason Witt, he was joining the UFC for his UFC debut. So this was his debut, and he gets, flattened like a board, unfortunately, in the first round with a left hand. But, you win some, you lose some in combat sports. And, you know, being a late add to the card is not an excuse. Make sure you're always ready at all times. And obviously he felt like the opportunity was there, that he was able to have be able to compete. So that's why he accepted the fight. So, Jason Witt, again, he didn't really show much of his skill set. It was a first round KO. So I'm sure that, he'll want to get back. This is going to help him kind of get back into the gym, get that motivation going, get training harder. So his next fight, this doesn't happen again, because this is not how you want to join the UFC. This is not how you want your debut to go for the UFC. But Takashi Sato, man, that dude got heavy hands. I tell you, that left hand, if you haven't had a chance to see it, make sure you check that one out. Next, I want to say, was the second best fight of the night, for me at least. This was Brendan Allen versus Kyle Daucus. And these guys are two accomplished grapplers. Now, it's not every day in the UFC where you see two high-skill grapplers go at it. A lot of the guys are stand-up guys. Obviously, your best guys could both stand up and grapple. And grappling is usually, the trump card over someone that's just a striker. But these guys were well-rounded athletes. They're able to strike. They're able to grapple, but more of a grappling background. For those of you that haven't seen like a masterpiece when it comes to grappling, this was the fight to watch. Again, I'm not a big fan when it comes to, fights that are on the ground, but these are two high-level guys, and it was very interesting to watch the fight and see them, kind of staying calm while they're on the ground, not in a good position, but knowing what to do, reversing on the ground. It was interesting. It was like a chess match, and it's a lot different from stand-up. During this fight, I kind of grew an appreciation for those that are wrestlers and have that jiu-jitsu and are able to operate on the ground, while grappling. It's interesting. So for those of you that had, missed the fight, again, it was a grappling masterpiece. Strike was great. The striking was great, but it went the distance. Now, I had Brendan Allen winning 2-1 on my card, at least, or my imaginary card. And Kyle Daucus won at least the third round, because he had Brendan Allen on the ground pretty much the whole third round. But for whatever reason, the judges saw it differently. They still had Allen winning. I think everybody knew that, but one of the judges had the fight 3-0 for Brendan Allen, and that one was ridiculous. I know that some of the commentators were also questioning that card, because how do you spend like 3-4 minutes on your back in the third round? Now, he did have a late flurry with like 20 seconds left in the third round, but I don't think it was enough to kind of cancel out him being pretty much he was fairly dominated on the ground for the whole third round. So that was interesting. I'm sure Dana White's going to be looking into the judges and seeing what's going on there, because there's no way that anyone had that fight 3-0 except for that judge, which again is a problem. You don't want to leave it to the judges. This is for boxing. This is for any sport that has judges. When you leave it up to the judges, there is room for them to screw everything up, and it's unfortunate. A lot of these guys put in, weeks sometimes, but months of their lives to get into shape, to get ready for fights. And you have judges who, for the most part, have no experience with, mixed martial arts, and they're judging a fight. And then you get scores like this where, the guy's on his back the whole time, but because you've seen a late flurry with 20 seconds left, you're going to give him the round, when the first 4 minutes he was literally on his back and defending the whole time, because he didn't have great position for the third round. So it's unfortunate. That's why people like seeing submissions. They like seeing knockouts, because then it's not left to the judges. So that's my second favorite fight of the night: Brendan Allen versus Kyle Daucus. So that one was good. Now we have our next fight is Villante versus Maurice Greene. Now this one was an interesting fight. I know before the fight they were talking about how these guys used to be football teammates in high school, I believe, and very friendly with each other. Initially, when I started watching the fight, when the fight first began, it looked like both of the guys were very timid and almost like afraid to strike each other. You could tell, like, they didn't really want to fight each other, at least in my eyes. Or maybe they were just cautious and kind of feeling each other out, which probably is the case. But from a novice's standpoint, at least from like a novice in MMA, it looked like these guys had too much respect for each other to actually fight in the first round. Second round, third round, obviously started getting picked up. But Greene has great length, good size. Villante, he was actually a little smaller, a little bit wider, but he has, some power in those hands. So Maurice Greene, his plan during the fight was to stay on the outside, hit him with some leg kicks, hit him with some push kicks, kind of hit him, step back, keep that range. And Villante the whole time was trying to close the distance, grapple, make sure everything was like close combat. In the third round, Greene actually got, he looked like he dominated, or he won the first 2 rounds, at least in my eyes. And in the third round, there were a couple issues with eye pokes. And after the last eye poke, obviously they gave both of them a break so dude could, Villante could get his eye kind of checked and everything. After that, he hit Greene with like a mean, I want to say it was a left hand, and dropped Greene to his back. I thought the fight was going to be over, which would be ridiculous because Greene was pretty much winning the whole fight. But it was crazy to see that Greene was able to keep his composure. I thought that the referee was going to call it. Greene was able to keep his composure, and he's not a champion, but he had that champion's mentality, that determination to not lose. Never gave up on himself, and ended up winning with one of the weirdest submissions that you'll see in the UFC. Even the commentators were kind of surprised that the submission attempt, if you want to call it, that Greene was able to secure and lock in was something that people usually don't see. I know the referee, after the fight, once they announced the winner, they called it a arm triangle. Now, again, somebody that's a novice in MMA world, I've never seen anything like that. It looks like a lot of the commentators for the UFC haven't seen that, and it was just a weird situation. Villante, he looked like he was gassed in the third round, and maybe that might have been the reason why he, tapped out. But for those of you that want to see it, make sure you check that out. Again, the submission was very odd. I've never seen it before. It's definitely not something you could do on the UFC game for sure. But it was an interesting win for Greene, who had a great story. He had a great story after the fight during his interview, his post-fight interview, talking about, he was hoping to win this fight so he could move his family, I believe, to New Mexico to get more training. He did everything he could. He was very emotional during that time. But it looks like he, has all the motivation he needs as the breadwinner, and somebody that's trying to keep a roof over his family's head, food on the plate. So all you could do is root for a guy like this. And Greene, again, had that determination to win, and maybe his family was that motivation to say, hey, I'm not quitting during this fight. So big shout out to Greene on the win. Interesting submission, but it was a good fight. The next one, the co-main event, was Mike Perry versus Mickey Gall. Mike Perry, number one, that dude looks crazy, man. Not like he looks like a guy you don't mess with. Like if you run into the street, if you run into a dark alley and you see him, like he's the guy you turn around, like keep walk the other way. But no, he's one of my favorite fighters. Mike Perry. His personality is good too, especially during the interviews. Funny dude. So definitely one of my favorite fighters in the UFC. But dude is tough, man. The guy's a straight slugger. For those of you that watch his fights, especially with his striking, like he's known for his power. But if you watch him throw punches, he's not really good at throwing punches. He's just very strong. His technique with throwing punches is a little off, but it gets the job done. I mean, the dude has strength. The dude is putting, bricks. He got bricks basically attached to his arm. And, again, he's one of the toughest guys in the UFC for sure. But, Mickey Gall's, his stand-up has progressed, but, he's more of a grappler. Perry was just too dangerous for him. He was definitely more of a heavy hitter, which ended up being the kind of the deciding factor. I mean, Perry was able to make some big moments late in the fight, especially late in the third round, where he's able to kind of drop Mickey Gall and end the fight in a good way. But Perry, it looked like a landslide to me. Perry won every single round, according to me. And, Gall, he was gassed, man. He got gassed like in the middle of the second round. So obviously you'd like to see a little bit more conditioning there on that end. Hopefully he's able to fix that up, because I think he is a good fighter. You could definitely tell that he's been working on his striking and trying to get better when it comes to striking. But watching this fight, you could tell that he still has a lot to learn about the sport. And he will be a part of the UFC as far as, making some good fights. So I'm excited to see Gall fight again. Perry, again, more conditioned fighter. He just looked like the fresher fighter coming out of the fight. He looked like he was ready to go another 3 rounds after the fight. But, man, dude is gold on the mic when it comes to the interview. Check that out if you guys haven't had a chance to see it. But that was the co-main event. Now, let's get into the main event, which, before I even talk about, this is about the main event. This might have been the best fight that I've ever seen. And this is on the line of Forrest Griffin, Shane Bonner. I think that's the name of it. That was one of my favorite fights of all time. One of the best fights I've seen when it comes to just stand-up fights. And this Dan Hooker and Dustin Poirier fight was, I think, eclipsed that. I think now I could say this might have been one of the best fights I've ever seen, or the best fight that I've ever seen. And for sure, this is going to be fight of the year candidate. Dan Hooker, Dustin Poirier. I believe this is the second time they fought. Dan Hooker called out Dustin after his last win. And these guys, you could say they have bad blood. Those words exchanged definitely before the fight occurred. But man, it was insane. And for those of you that watch Dustin Poirier fight, I was first introduced to him when I seen him go against Conor McGregor for the first time. And when McGregor finished him in the first round, I was like, oh, this guy's a scrub. I've never, mind you, I wasn't watching UFC that much. I didn't know who this guy was. But that shows you how good McGregor was at the time, because he made Dustin Poirier look like a scrub, man. I mean, first round KO. And I was just like, man, this guy must be like a cakewalk. We call them a hams. I thought Dustin Poirier was a ham. So I couldn't have been further from the truth. I mean, this guy won the last 5 of the last 6 fights. That one fight loss was to Khabib, which he almost won with that guillotine attempt. But no, this fight was definitely one of the best fights I've ever seen. And after the first round, they threw so many punches, when they were striking, that I was like, there's no way that they'll be able to keep this intensity, keep this energy through 5 rounds. Mind you, this is a 5-round fight. It's not a title fight, but since it's a main event fight, they get 5 rounds. But no, man, Dan Hooker looked like he was getting the best of Dustin Poirier in the first 2 rounds. And then after that, it was all Dustin Poirier. I mean, just hitting him with big shots. I mean, it was insane. Dustin Poirier, I would be shocked if he's able to walk this week. His right leg was getting chopped for sure during the fight, especially during the first 2 rounds. I think Hooker kind of got away from what was working for him, and those were the leg kicks, the front leg kicks. So those front leg calf kicks. So if he was able to keep that going, through the 3-4 rounds, or all the way up to the 5th round, he might have been able to win this fight. But when you get hit, like Mike Tyson says, when you get hit in the mouth, everybody has a plan until you get hit in the mouth. And Dan Hooker, as soon as he was getting tapped on that chin, and he was getting hit. Don't get it twisted. He was getting hit. He kind of lost sight of what the plan was. And, I think those calf kicks for him was his bread and butter and his key to victory. So, but no, Dustin Poirier, man, dude has a champion's mentality. Man, it's hard to see a guy that went from, getting KO'd, first round by McGregor. And I know he had fights before that, but to see him at his absolute lowest and kind of work his way up and beat, Gaethje, Max Holloway. I mean, he's beating name guys to work his way up the ladder. This is a guy that's actually worked his way up the ladder. So he's not some just random guy that just got put there. He worked his way to get there, and those are the type of guys you want to see as champions. So I'm always rooting for Dustin Poirier whenever he fights. I'm definitely going to be watching because he has some entertaining fights. And, unfortunately for me, I thought that dude was a scrub after I seen him versus McGregor. But, both guys are warriors. They both have their bruises. And I appreciate both of them for taking part in a fight and giving fight fans, especially during this time, something to cheer for. I mean, it was crazy. I was on the edge of my bed during the whole fight. So if you haven't had a chance to see any of these fights, make sure you watch at least the Dan Hooker-Dustin Poirier fight. I'm sure somewhere on YouTube somebody is illegally putting it on there. Definitely not me, but make sure if they do have it on there, make sure you check it out before they take it down. But of course, I would like you to get ESPN Plus. Then you don't have to watch it illegally. You can watch it legally on ESPN Plus. So, yeah, ESPN Plus, real talk. ESPN executives listening to the show, or Disney executives, hook your boy up. Thanks for stopping by. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button for more fire sports takes. And for those of you who are on the go, make sure you subscribe to our full show, which airs every Thursday on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and a bunch more. Until then, I'm chucking it up, and I'll see you guys next time.